Brought to you by Knights of Awakening. This is the Labyrinth. And today's topic is going to be one of some particular interest to a lot of people. It's going to have to do with spirit work or working with spirits of some form, be they the deceased, or be they extraplanar entities of some form, or even thought forms, things of that nature. So these are intelligences outside of the self, and it's going to be with how do they fit in a defensive role? How does this work? So the first thing to hit on is that there are two big opinions in the magical community. One that works very much almost exclusively with spirits, and one that tends to avoid it, to be really honest, and avoids working with any kind of spiritual forces outside of themselves and extremely higher powers. Both of these are valid, but I want to hit on some classic mysticism before we get too far into this. So classic mysticism relies very heavily on spirits. In fact, almost all of your old forms of magic are make a deal with this thing. If it's a goetic demon, make a deal with this goetic demon. If it's an angel, make a deal with this angel. If it's the fae, or a leprechaun, or a dwarf, or an elf, make a deal with this being, entity. Powerful form that manifests itself in this way. Make a deal. That is a lot of old magic. And a lot of people, they shy away from that these days. A lot of the older texts have a lot of Christian influence in them too. And when I say Christian influence, I mean dogmatic Christian mysticism. Summon the angels, call upon God. Sing the praises, call the names, beat the asses. And that last part refers specifically to Solomonic magic and the Goetia, the idea that you call upon things and then force them to serve you. I'm not going to get into the rights and wrongs of this. I'm going to say I personally am not a big fan of beating beings' asses to achieve my goals, because, how can I put this? There's the moral implication for me as a practitioner. I tend to treat spiritual beings the same way I would people. It's one thing for me to put a help wanted sign out and see who shows up and interview them. It's another for me to rip someone off the street and say, guess what your job is? And I'm just not comfortable being the guy who rips someone off the street and says, this is your job now. Maybe other people are. Maybe that's how they do things. There's a lot of traditions in which that is done. Who am I to judge those traditions? Some dude in a hat, some beads. So, with that, a lot of these traditions do rely heavily on that. But there are other traditions that are even older. Shamanism as a whole and animism as a precursor to most forms of shamanism both rely heavily on the idea of spirit forces and spirits within things, spirits within the land, spirits that are around you, making alliances, making compacts with these beings, working with them to better yourself, to give you an edge. And a lot of spiritual combat, as a result, relies on these methods. So, how does this work out then? I have to kind of hit on that precursor of what all this is, because a lot of people don't work with spirits. They work with elements now. They work with symbols. They work with seals. They work with runes. Hey, you know what? One of my favorite tools. Probably my favorite tool to work with for me, personally. But I work with spirits a lot for other people. So, you've got to set the groundwork. This is a very traditional method. Working with spirits is something very old. It's very shamanic and related to shamanism more than it really is any other spirituality. The idea of familiar spirits is presented heavily in the Goetia, and it's presented heavily in some witchcraft texts, and it is hinted at throughout most forms of mythology, witchcraft, and sorcery of various forms in various cultures. So this is not a dirty topic. This is not something where you should shy away from the idea of it. So then the question becomes, what is their role in protection for you? And then we've got to get into the role of what is coming after you. So I like to use physical analogs for these things because people really like to either make the spiritual much bigger than it is or much smaller than it is. They want to say, well, I have a spirit and therefore it can do everything. I've made a pact with the spirit, I've worked with someone else to bring it to work with me, or perhaps, I brought it forth myself from the ether. I went out and found it to work with it. There's 1,000 ways for someone to come into the point where they have an alliance with the spirit, and it's now working for them. The question becomes, is it a guardian spirit? A lot of people say, well, since it's mine, it'll do well enough. Beings and spirits are kind of like people. There's a reason there's 72 in the Goetia. Whether you like that or not, there's a reason for it. Now, I know a lot of different skills in my life. I'm a fair swordsman. I could probably teach you to sword fight if I had to, without too much issue. I'm a decent boxer, not professional level by any measure, but I could teach you how to throw punches, get out of the way of punches, and keep your footwork good. I'm an excellent mystic. I could definitely teach you how to work with different spells and spirits and things like that. And I'm a great computer repairman. That was one of the first skills I picked up in my life where I really mastered it. All these are things that I'm good with. I'm a terrible mechanic. That doesn't mean I can't learn how to fix a car. I've done a few repairs here and there on our car. I've gotten some skill in it. I'm a world-class failure at almost all forms of stitching at this point. Not that I can't, hold two pieces of cloth together, but I can't do it real pretty. Not the world's greatest carpenter either. I can put a nail in a board. I can do some simple carpentry here and there. Fair at woodworking. Pretty good at woodworking. My wife's a woodworking expert in the family. Good with most forms of technology. So why do I go through that list? There's a whole world of things I'm not good at. You notice a lot of things that I'm able to do. I'm fair or capable or can do, but not very good. You wouldn't want to call on me for these things. My wife can make a beautiful robe. I can get two pieces of cloth to hold themselves together temporarily. In an emergency, I can get them to hold themselves together indefinitely. Is it pretty? No, I wouldn't know. But I can make it happen, Beings, spirits, servitors, various forms of otherworldly intelligence are the same way. Some are experts in warfare. Some are experts in the matters of love in the heart. Some are experts in making physical contact. Some are experts in manifesting change in a person's life and gaining them wealth or success. And none of them are good at everything. Now, this needs to put your dogma aside and be realistic. A lot of people make it a dogma. This being is beyond me and therefore it must be better at all things than I am. That's nonsensical. So we have to establish that first. Some beings are better at one thing than another. So let's focus then on levels of capability of a guardian being. The lowest level of a guardian being is one that has an interest in it and has worked towards it somewhat. This is a secondary skill for them, but they've taken some opportunity to grow in it. If you had many, many spirits, if you're a shaman have tens of thousands of spirits, or if you're someone who works with spirits regularly, a spirit worker, we'll call them. If you're a spirit worker, you may have dozens or tens of dozens of spirits. And if some of them have taken to learning the arts of combat, if they've taken to working on that skill with other spirits, or with you when you project into the other planes, they're going to have a definite degree of skill in it. And the comparison I want to make with this is a very physical comparison. I like physical comparisons because it makes it easier because we live in a physical world most of the time. Even if we project an hour out of every day, even if we do trance work 3 hours every day, you've still spent the bulk of your day here. No one spends the bulk of their day over there. So I want to hit on that with a physical example. And I always use the guard dog example with this when explaining it to people. The lowest level of spirit that is capable of battling is like a guard dog. Um, my dog, my Chihuahua, is a wonderful dog. I love him dearly. And I have spirit companions that I love dearly that I work with, whom I would not necessarily send into a war. That's not entirely accurate. Most of the ones I work with are warriors. It's the nature of what I do and who I'm called to work with. So I shouldn't say that there are any that I wouldn't send in war. There are some that are better suited. They'd be the higher tier, okay, way above Chihuahua. But if a being is mostly a companion, or brings wisdom or wealth or things of that nature, or influences the hearts of others to help give you an advantage, or perhaps simply someone you have just a strong connection with, it's just a spirit you formed a strong bond with. Unless you have done something to amplify their power, altar work or ritual work to amplify them, or some form of attuning them to a higher power, they're just not going to be effective in a fight. They're going to slow down spirits that are around their level of combat capability. That sounds kind of harsh. This gets into the whole ego that people have about battle. People want to say, well, if I try hard enough, I could win a fight against someone faster, better, and stronger than me. No, not if you try hard enough. If you're smart enough, or if you think ahead enough, if you're ready for it, there's a whole slew of possibilities. If you let them knock you down and you wait for them to turn their back and you get back up and rush them with a knife, yeah, definitely, you got a chance then. You're going to box them, and you're dealing with someone who's twice your size, 3 times your speed, and can lift you and the weights you lift at the same time and use that as their workout. You're not going to box them. You're not going to fight this person to an honorable standstill. That's not going to be how you win. And the same goes with spirits. They might be able to avenge what was done, or to help create defenses, create barriers, or things of that nature. Most spirits have some degree of skill with an innate energy work in the planes, with what we call magic manifesting from here to there to create lattice works of protection, walls, and spheres, and shields, and things of that nature. Most can do some of that. So most can provide a barrier, okay? Your door is a barrier. So we use the door as the physical example. So they can build a good door. And if they can't build a good door, at least they can build some kind of door if there's no door there. Doors can be kicked down fairly easily. Never met a door that I couldn't knock down with my shoulder. So that's where their main function is going to stop. They can slow down a stronger attacker. So, normal sized dog, not a guard dog, with skill, to maybe build some protection. The next level up would be those that focus more on combat but are not heavy hitters, powerhouses. These are beings that their presence is known and powerful, and they focus on combat to a greater degree, but it's not necessarily their sole focus. This is a guard dog for all intents and purposes. Now, if the person coming through that door is your average nitwit criminal, in this case, your average person who's using magic, they don't do it all the time, and they're just throwing a quick curse, or they've sent one of their own spirits and it's about the same level. They got to hammer through the door so you know they're coming, or your spirits know they're coming. They're kind of prepared. You've got the home field advantage on this, and you're probably going to win. Even if they're not necessarily a guard dog, you got a couple regular dogs and a guard dog there. Yeah, you probably got this. Yeah, no worries. Most people, they get bit, they run. Now, it's a criminal who's armed themselves a little better. If someone practices magic a little bit deeper, they're probably carrying a gun with them. This doesn't bode well for the guard dog. It might wound them enough, though, that they use up all their bullets. And thankfully, spirits are pretty hardy. That they're wounded, and this person has to retreat, if you're lucky. Well, the other side of this is, what if they just send their own dog to deal with this? That's the next step. They send their own guard dog. Their own guard dog might never get through the door. But if it does, say it's a significantly bigger dog, we're now getting into a military-trained dog, police dog, battle dog, maybe even has a bit of armor on. This is the next phase up. This is a being that focuses on combat extensively. comprehensively. They are not the very best at it in the world, but they're damn close. They're close enough that you would have a hard time telling the difference. Again, dog with armor, okay? This person comes through. They try to come through. They got to knock the door down first. They're armed. They've got weapons. They've got either a little bit of training or they got a couple of their own dogs with them. This dog's got a good chance, again, of slowing them down. If there's more than one, more than two or three, odds are this person's getting slowed down or stopped. So now we move into the part that you don't want to hear about. And this is where we're dealing with people at the highest level of skill. These people are combat experts. It's all they do. Or they're bringing, let's see, Nepalese shaman claimed to have about 10,000 spirits on hand at any one time as a low ball number. Let's say they're bringing 5,000 guard dogs in armor. How good were those doors again? You build better defenses. You are not going to last that long just relying on that guard dog. That spirit at that level, even though it's armored and kitted out and ready for everything, and this is robo-dog at this point, not going to hold its own against that many numbers. So we move up into the next highest tier, which is the combat experts. The elite of the elite, the spirit that is all they focus on. They wake up and they practice their fighting arts in the spiritual realms. If they have any physical purpose in our realm, any mundane task they fill, it's probably to kill. It's probably to do harm to life. They do one thing very well. Now you've moved up to something more akin to having a human being guard you. That's like having a fairly well-trained soldier, but whose stamina is not as strong. Because remember, they're not grounded in this plane completely the way we are. And if this person is fairly skilled, again, they're either bringing a large number of spirits or they themselves have a large amount of training. This could be enough to stop them. If there are 3 or 4 or 5, this could be enough to, if not stop them, definitely slow them down to make it not worth their time. So then we need to get into how physical combat works. See, the physical analogy is great, but magic and curse work, it's more like lobbing missiles and sending soldiers, and occasionally going out to strike at a target yourself. So visualize this as 2 castles, and those castles represent your safety and their safety. They have cannons on their castles. This would represent curses. You have castle walls. These are constructs made by spirits to protect you, or made by yourself to protect you. Perhaps you use runes. I guess I'm the mason of the metaphysical world in that respect. I build my defenses when I want defenses of that nature. Or perhaps you avoid by keeping the castle in different places. You have a moving castle. Anime about that, I think, had to do with a wizard. The point being, this is more of a launching attacks from one place to the other. Occasionally, spirits may be sent out to plague and harass, but the castle walls should do the job. And if they don't, certainly strong guardian spirits will do the job. And this is where we get into that hard reality. What if you have a person, they're anchored in this realm? They're very hard to kill. Most spirits can be banished or dismissed with enough power, but they can't be banished outside of a place they're guarding. They can only be wounded or harmed in a way that reduces their effectiveness. So if a spirit tries to attack, it's on your property. You have authority there. Your spirits could harm it, and you could banish it, or they may even be able to banish it back to its home, and that will take something out of them. For a human being, they are rooted in the physical realm, the Midgard, this plane of existence. Their power doesn't stop so long as they breathe. Recognize that. You can't banish them. If they project, the most you can do is injure them enough they go back to their body, and if they're that skilled that they are launching an assault head first at you, you're probably not going to beat them. Not directly. But you can wear them down. They can only maintain that assault for so long before they get tired and go back to their body. Even if they're using curse works and altars, again, that's like cannons launching shells. You can handle that through just spirits alone. But if you have someone who all they do in magic is combat, this is a curse master. This is all they do is try to kill people with it. You are going to either need to be an expert in defense or an expert in return fire methods yourself, and you're going to have to be on par with what they're capable of doing. Now, the upside to this is that very, very powerful spirits are still going to slow those experts down. I've never had a spirit stop me in a battle. So I'm one of those people that focuses heavily on combat. But I've had them slow me down. I've had them burn through a half an hour to an hour of time to where I was physically exhausted from the spiritual conflict and went back to my body and rethought my position. Maybe did some more stuff to weaken up the situation. Now, in my younger years, I was a bit of a dick back then, to be really honest. More modern years, I've never had a spirit stop me from getting rid of it. I've never had a situation where I wasn't able to step in the way for a person unless it was something like a shadow self, which is not a separate entity but is a manifestation of the self in a shadow form. Think of it like an egregor or a thought form that you've given all of those things you don't like about yourself. Those I can't beat. I'm good. I could march through a small army without too much difficulty on the spiritual planes. At the highest levels, if there were a dozen or 2 dozen or 3 dozen of the strongest standing guard, I would never get through. I wouldn't have the time. I would have to bring a dozen or more of the strongest that I could bring. I would have to very much act as a shaman instead of the lovable Norse warhammer-wielding person you've all come to love. But I could still find a way through. Against a shadow, there's nothing I can do. And any spirit beings that would be protecting someone against a shadow would fail eventually, because the shadow eventually finds ways into the mind and the heart of the person, because it's already in there, where the being can't sit, where spirit cannot bring itself to stand in the way. So spirits can only help you rebuild the damage that does and help you overcome it, what you can do through ownership of yourself, through actualization of yourself, through taking back your own power from your shadow. That's how you do that. So this started with a question someone brought up about whether or not spirits could protect them from practitioners. And I couldn't tell if they meant practitioners or other spirits. So I guess TLDR, if you're listening, too long didn't reasonably listen. TLDL, too long didn't listen. The TLDL of this, if you're skipping to the end, is at a 1-to-1 level, a spirit can stop another spirit. And very, very powerful spirits and beings can stop even skilled conjurers or metaphysicists, wizards, sorcerers, mystics. I don't know what word you want to use in this, but they can stop them for a while. And that at a certain level of skill, the advantage of a human body starts to become advantageous. Now let's get into how that unbalances then. So if you take a spirit and you've dedicated an altar to it, and it is already a combat spirit, and you're giving it offerings, you're amping it up, you're meditating on it, and giving it some of your power, it is now boosted. It takes on some of your essence and some of your grounding into this realm. I've never had one of those stop me, but I've never had to go up against one either. To be really honest, most of the people I've ever had to go up against were very, very mean people, very arrogant as a result. So in their arrogance, they said, I'll do this myself. And I was like, good, that's going to give me a shot to do this. But I can tell you from working with a lot of different people that the ones that do rely on spirits in this way, when they do make offerings, they do keep altars set up, they do provide energy, they do all of these things that are good to amplify the spirit's ability to protect them, they get a lot of really good results out of it. So much so that the entire practice of shamanism is based on it. You have shaman that do this, and they do work for spirits to strengthen their connection to this world. They wear talismans. You know, this is my Norse mama. This is 81 beads so that I can count out prayers 81 times or mantras 81 times or chants, if you prefer the term, having to do with anything from my day-to-day magic workings to specifically Norse things. But I wanted something that was 9 times 9. A traditional shaman might wear something like this too, but for them, each bead is going to have a spirit. And each spirit, they're going to know its name and which bead that it's on. Someone like that, who then sits there and meditates for 10 minutes, so 810 minutes in a day, is that even possible? That's 10 hours. Isn't it? Yeah, something like that. A little over 10 hours, I think. I don't know. I probably got my math wrong. But they do 10 minutes a day on each one of these. Yeah, that's a huge power boost to those. Or if they have many spirits that they make a collective offering to. Or if they do work for specifically higher spirits who then have lesser ones underneath of them that aid them. Yeah, they're going to build a defense that is very hard to punch through. Even a professional who focuses only on combat is not going to be able to get through this. So the answer isn't traditional shamanism says, yeah, this is going to work. And in most cases, a very powerful being is going to be more than enough for your needs. Unless you go around ticking off the best of the best. And I mean, like, you're picking fights. And the thing is, most people, they throw a curse, they do a spell, it's over. They don't continue the fight after. Very few people are going to hate you enough to dedicate a 4x4 section of their house, inches, mind you, or a 12x12 section of their house for a decent size altar to just do curse work on you and send things after you. Very few people are going to put that much emphasis into hurting you. And if they do, you probably earned it. But if you've earned it that bad that you've got someone who all they do is curse work and combat magic and summoning spirits to plague people, and they dedicate that altar, I would be hard-pressed to fight someone like that. I do a lot of other things than that in a day. You will be hard-pressed as well. But they're not going to do it indefinitely. So then the question is, can you let it go once the fire is done? Remember the cannons in the castle? When you hear those cannons stop and you know they're done, and you see that they're packing the cannons up, they've given up, because even though they've wrecked your walls 1,000 times, you rebuild them. Are you going to load cannons up and go after them next? Because if you are, undoubtedly, they will get bigger cannons next time. So you better focus on becoming an expert at this too. You better devote your life to it if you're going to pick a fight. And you can say, well, it's not picking a fight if I'm defending myself, and that's true. But it doesn't matter. If someone knocks you down, and they're so big and so strong and so fast, and you have no way of stopping them right then and there, but you wait until you see them again on the street and you sucker punch them, you better take them out. Because if you don't, they're just going to beat you in the ground again. And yeah, that's not fair, but life isn't. So the rules of the universe remain more or less the same across magic and the physicality in this respect. And I hope this answers that question of defenses in this way. There's more than one way to defend yourself. A very great quote of my dear friend is as follows. I asked him about shielding, how to cut a circle for shielding, if he knew how, because he focuses on more raw energy work. And he looks me dead in the eye and he goes, "Of course I do. Everyone's got an aura." Yeah, that's the other side of things too. There's way more ways to defend yourself than just having spirits. There are things like attunements, there's spiritual practices, meditations, mantras, mudras. There are different types of chants, spells, rituals that you can do. You can either procure or make your own talismans and wards. You can shift wards out at random. There are thousands upon thousands of things. Spirit work as a defense is one aspect, and it's a good one. It's one good enough that the oldest forms of magic use it. So don't think I'm underplaying it, because one of the oldest forms of attack in magic is spirit work. So thank you. Hope this was entertaining and enlightening, and I hope it helped you awaken the night within.